When I was about 4, this was in 1997, my mum and brothers went to a water park on a weekend during the summer. The park was set up so that you would walk through the entrance and run directly into a food court with the little information or map station there. To the left was inside an arcade area with a roller coaster, a little one, directly outside of it, and behind the arcade building was an enormous wave pool. To the right of the entrance was the kiddie park, and then behind the kiddie park was a lazy river and all the water slides with it. Since my brothers were older and they wanted to ride the big slides, my mum and me split from them to head to the kiddie park. I remember playing for a little while, making some friends with some of the kids, when this one little boy asked me if I wanted to go to the wave pool. Since I was little, my mum told me that I was not allowed to go to the wave pool, at least without an adult, so I told him that I couldn't. He then said that it's not a problem. My dad is already waiting for us, and he's already told my mum that he was going to watch us. Well, being a dumb kid and marveling at the wave pool since we got there, I was pretty much sold and followed him over there. My mum probably didn't notice at the time because the lawn chair that she was sitting in around the kiddie pool was being blocked by little kid slides and billions of other little children. But we headed to the wave pool and met the kid's dad. He immediately took my hand and guided me into the wave pool. I remember only being there for like 2 minutes tops until he picked me up and carried me back out of the pool. I don't think that I even asked where we were going, but I assumed the food court because that's where we were headed. I then remember reaching the entrance gates and a lifeguard approached us and asked if my name was so-and-so, and I said yes, and started crying because I guess I thought that I was in trouble. The lifeguard then grabs me from the dude, and I see my mum running up, sobbing. Years later, we're revisiting this story, and she tells me that she noticed that I was missing pretty quickly and told a lifeguard to close off the entrance to the park. I was wearing a yellow bathing suit with pink flowers on it and 2 yellow ribbons in my hair, so the description gave me away instantly, when the man was carrying me out, that is. I asked my mum about the kid, and she had no idea what I was talking about. She said that it was just the singular man, and apparently he ran to his car in the parking lot as soon as the lifeguard took me out of his arms. In other words, there was no kid with him. One night, while I was about 17 or maybe 18, I was living in this old Victorian home on the top floor. I lived alone. You could afford to live alone back then. And it was a creepy place. I loved the upstairs. It was very nicely done, and it was only $279 a month, close to the downtown of the city that I was living in. Now, one night, I was unexpectedly in for the evening. I had a full-time job, a part-time job as well, and a very active social life, so being home alone was pretty rare for me. It was raining very hard that day, and I remember looking outside and watching the puddles get bigger and bigger. I went to bed quite early. Suddenly, though, I woke up abruptly after what felt like I had been sleeping for a long time. It was completely dark, almost pitch black in my bedroom. There was just a bit of light in the corner of my room from the streetlight outside. I looked to my digital bedside clock. I had only been asleep for 5 minutes at the most, though. I kind of got chills then, and I heard what I can only describe as like a hissing sound. I looked up to the ceiling of my bedroom, and there was a black blob-like form that was just moving and changing size and slowly making its way to me. By the time the realization that it was coming to me hit me, I became unable to move my limbs, my body. I could not talk or scream. I just laid there unable to do anything but watch it get closer to me. When it reached me, it just kind of settled on me. I could feel its weight. I couldn't close my eyes. I so desperately wanted to, but I just couldn't. The terror that I felt cannot be described, though. The evil that I felt from this form was immense, and I have not felt anything like this, that kind of evil, in my life ever. After what seemed like hours, though, suddenly it was gone. My room got brighter and I was able to move again. I checked my clock, but again, only 5 minutes had passed. This experience happened 2 more times while I was living in that old Victorian house. I later learned, though, through research at the library, that I had apparently been visited by an incubus. When I returned to the city that I grew up in and lived in that house, I drive by it. It's still standing, and I don't know if it's divided up into 3 separate apartments now, but it's a lot more run down, that's for sure. A lot of strange things would happen in those rooms. Things would go missing, and I'd find them in very odd places. And as far as I'm concerned, that house, it's definitely haunted. I was traveling with some friends on some 4x4 trails in southern Idaho. We were camping out one night, singing music around a campfire for quite a while, and my friends decided to go to bed eventually. My ex and I stayed up a little bit longer, hanging out around the fire and just enjoying the atmosphere. Then suddenly, everything just got dead silent, like the world got put on mute. I'm no stranger to this phenomenon. It generally happens when there's a predator nearby, and being in bear country, I had my bear spray on me, so I wasn't too worried. My ex and I continued to enjoy the fire, though, until we heard someone way off in the distance say, "honey," 3 times. You could tell it was far away, but it also had the sound of a whisper rather than a yell, an almost questioning tone, like it was a woman calling out for her husband. My friend peeked out of his rooftop tent and asked if we were the ones calling out, but we weren't. The weirdest thing, though, is that it just didn't sound right. More so something that sounds like a woman calling out honey, but not actually a human woman. I couldn't put my finger on what it was, but the more rational side of us decided that it may have been a hiker or something. The moon was full, so the idea of a couple hiking at night, especially since we weren't too far from the nearest town, wasn't too unlikely, I guess. My friend and his girlfriend, they decided to rejoin us for a little bit, and they also commented on the lack of wildlife sounds. We sat for a few more minutes before, again, hearing that honey sound. My friend agreed that it didn't sound right at all. He called out hello just in case there was some poor lost woman somewhere, but nothing responded. A few minutes later, we heard the same call, but from the complete opposite direction. With how far it sounded, there is just no way some lost hiker could have circled all the way around our camp that quickly. We lit up our floodlights, and we quickly booked it out of the area, and ended up cutting our overland trip very short. I still have no idea who or what made those noises, and it really still creeps me the heck out. Honestly, too, I'm really not sure if I'll be traveling to southern Idaho ever again. Now, I know that this sounds fantastical and wild, and honestly, I couldn't disagree. This is in fairly remote backcountry, West Virginia, which is known for being old and haunted. It was experienced entirely by the 2 of us, but the worst parts by all 4. This led to all 4 of us at some point battling personal issues in our lives that I believe stemmed directly from this encounter. The following is, at least to my memory and what I've been able to corroborate with the other people that were there, 100% accurate and true. So when I was 17, 2004, we had a bad experience camping near haunted train tunnels and sites of sudden tragic death. The history of the immediate 1 square mile area is that mother and son drowning in the creek nearby, drug dealers killed in state police shootout at a nearby hunting cabin, and many years before, cheap laborers had been killed building this double set of train tunnels. They were actually buried in a long-forgotten little graveyard nearby the tunnels that has since been found and restored. we decided to go camping before graduation as a friend group of 4, just to do something one last time before we all went our separate ways in life. This is a private property on the backside of a big hill around which the creek flows in a huge several-mile-long bend. A camp set up and fire going. Shortly after nightfall, my cousin and I sat back on the creek bed, maybe 20 yards away from the camp spotlight, fish in the water. We then began to hear a sort of rhythmic sloshing sound. A slosh of what sounded like somebody wading through the water, maybe halfway up to their shin deep. So we shined the light around upstream, and we then spotted symmetrically and rhythmically consistent disturbances made by what looked and sounded like invisible feet or legs sloshing toward us. When we would turn our spotlights off, it would start again. It would then stop when illuminated, and whatever it was definitely reacting to us. And this was the first Ice Bucket's stomach clench moment we knew that this was not fish and could not rationalize what was actually happening. This scared us pretty badly, but we decided best to be kept to ourselves and join the others gathered at the fire suddenly. As we made our way back, we heard the sloshing make its way to where we were on the bank, and the noise stopped. Given the speed that we witnessed it moving and how far it was from us when we were watching it, it must have sped up to make it to the bank that we were on in the amount of time that it took us to get to the camp. Others at the camp heard it as well and figured that we'd either gotten in or somehow riled up some fish, but we just played it off in the end. And as crazy as it sounded and looked like an invisible person wading towards us through the water. After the noise ended at the creek bank, we then all saw the tall grass disturbed as something that we couldn't see ran around the foliage perimeter of our circularly cleared campsite. Now, this could have been an animal, I admit, but whatever it was fast. We then began to hear what sounded like a man talking to us, as in speaking into the ear of each person, the left ear, if that matters. At first it sounded like garble, really, but after maybe 15 to 20 seconds, we could make out the words saying we shouldn't be there, and we needed to leave, before finally addressing us directly, and saying slightly more forcefully, "You need to leave." Obviously, as you can imagine, this was absolutely terrifying, and at first we thought that it was a person or group of people out there walking up on our camp and that it was dangerous. We were all frozen with fear though, but then adrenaline suddenly hit. As we freaked out and started to run to our ATV, all 4 of us saw what we all described as a tall black shadow man wearing what looked like a hat, relaxing against the front of our ATV. It straightened up when we saw it, and it saw us, allegedly, and it just sort of hung there staring at us for a few seconds. No feet, the legs ended in sort of wavy lines, like looking above the fire at the heat waves. It stood out against the dark night behind it, though, and it was definitely there. The girl screamed, which broke our fear freeze, and it zipped like the Flash back towards the train tunnels people had died in. Interestingly, when we went to start the ATV, it sort of turned over sluggishly as if the battery had been slightly drained, despite working fine not long before when we rode it down. This entire event happened over the course of, I don't know, I want to say maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and within an hour of the sun going down. After putting our story out there, I received a lot of feedback from people as well who have also had bad encounters in this area over many years. Even a guy I worked with who didn't know that we knew this area told me that my uncle had hired him to trap in that area, and it was the only place that he didn't check traps alone at night. He said that it was almost like the animals leave the place at night and it was completely quiet out there. No less than a month later, my uncle who owns the property was up on the hill raccoon hunting at night with a dog. At some point the dog was on a rock face up above him and actually knocked a large rock loose that fell and struck my uncle in the side of the neck. This understandably messed him up pretty bad, and paralyzed almost his entire body, but he still had limited functionality on his left side. We could never figure out how he got himself back to his ATV and turned it over and drove himself out of there because, really, he just wasn't capable of that anymore. It wasn't until probably maybe 2 or 3 years later, around Halloween, when my story makes its rounds on the local Facebook groups, that my uncle texted my mother out of the blue. You have no reason to believe my uncle's character reference, but honestly, he is a salt-of-the-earth, hunting, farming, working sort of man. Even working past his retirement as a millionaire. He's honest, funny, and just incredibly a stand-up guy. He is easygoing, but also no nonsense for sure. In his text to my mother, though, he said, "I've never told anybody this before, and I probably won't again. But the man in the hat that the kids saw at the creek that night helped pick me up off the ground and put me back on the ATV and turned me around." Until I heard that, I had always assumed that the Shadow Man was the one who was trying to scare us out of there, but thinking back on it, maybe he was the one whispering to us, telling us that we needed to leave and possibly avoid something scarier and more dangerous. Although I honestly have no idea what could have been scarier than that. Here and talk about my house and some of the weird stuff that's been going on recently in it. I've lived in this house alone for about 5 years now, I would say. Nothing really noteworthy happened until 2021, and it really wasn't anything crazy. Like small stuff. My garage door would be open when I thought that I'd closed it. The sink is running, cupboards open, etc. I started noticing other stuff happening around that time as well, though. I would think that I'd hear footsteps around my house, but it was always something that I thought that I could play off as just being tired since I work full-time along with college and all that. It didn't happen all too often as well, so I didn't really worry too much about it. But it started to become more frequent as years have gone by, and recently a few things have happened that have definitely got me pretty spooked, to the point that I've stayed at a friend's house because of them. I'll share them now, but I'm really not sure what I want out of this. Maybe some clarity or something, or some advice on what to do, but yeah, here's what happened. So the first thing that happened was around August of 2024. I was sitting in my office room doing some homework and playing some music. I started to hear what I thought sounded like a woman at my door. Now, I note, my next door neighbor is a single mother and she goes on walks past my house literally every night. Figuring that she might be at my door asking for something, I open the door, only to find no one there. I close the door and sit back down, and over the next week or so, I started hearing what I thought was a woman talking just out of earshot. I would think that it was my TVs, but I keep them off when I'm not using them. I was pretty stumped and frustrated over it as well. It all built up too as well to one night where I'm laying in bed and I hear this same voice, lady just out of earshot, talking at my bedroom door. Tired and creeped out, I jumped out of bed to check, only to find when opening my door, nobody was there. It chilled me enough to where goosebumps formed. I locked my bedroom door, which I never do, and got back into bed. Maybe 5 minutes later, it started happening again. I got back up and literally screamed, "Leave me alone," packed a bag, and I ended up spending the night at a friend's house a little ways down the street, and it hasn't happened since. The next incident happened about a month ago. Doing homework in my room, all of a sudden my home phone starts ringing. Problem is that I haven't had a phone connected since the hurricane swept through Florida, and have had no reason to put it back in. I quickly jumped out of my bed, shuffled out to check the phone, and sure enough, it's ringing at me. I picked it up and it immediately died. I have absolutely no clue how this could have rung as well, unless the phone battery is jacked up or something. Since then, I have thrown the phone away because, to heck with that, right? Now, this next one is the one that made me want to come on here and talk about my experience thus far. This happened about a week ago. So, I have a boxer puppy who turns 1 on Saturday, by the way, who is usually pretty relaxed. I've never seen him frightened because, frankly, he just doesn't even know what's going on half the time. It's probably about 1 or 2 in the morning. I'm chilling in my kitchen. Knox is laying next to me, probably wanting my food. Eventually, he walks away, and as I finally indulge into said food, he stops about 6 feet from my garage door and starts growling, like tail up, looking like he's going to bite someone, kind of growl. Mind you, I've never seen him growl like this, not once, so I was a little bit freaked out from the get-go, to say the least. I try calling him back over, but he is absolutely dialed into whatever he's growling at. I start walking over slowly to him. I turn the corner to look at my door, and it literally slams. It sounds like a giant object slammed right into my door, loud as anything. My dog jumps back and runs to go hide in my room. I, on the other hand, open my door, run into my garage to see if someone had tried to break in, only to see that everything was perfectly quiet. The door was fine too. Needless to say, I grabbed the dog up and we drove to stay at my friend's house for the night again after that. Since then too, I've been on edge the past week being at my own home. It feels like I have to watch my back constantly now because something just might happen. I'm losing sleep over this, and honestly, I really just don't know what to do at this point.